As in previous Lotus Sutra chapter summary videos, I'm reciting the description of the chapter from Hurvitz's translation. In his preface, his description of chapter 21 is that the Bodhisattvas who have assembled from all over the universe promise to propagate the lotus, whereupon both Buddhas stretch out their tongues, which they extend very far, and emit a ray of light that illuminates the entire universe. So this chapter 21 in the Hurvitz translation is called The Supernatural Powers of the Thus Come One. And in Gene Reeves' translation, which is the one that I recited from, it's called The Divine Powers of the Tathagata. Picking up the narrative of this fantastical tale, you'll recall that these myriad bodhisattvas who are now promising to propagate the Lotus Sutra are the bodhisattvas who have come with the various Buddhas from across the universe to join Sakyamuni Buddha and Abundant Treasures Buddha, who are still in the stupa of Abundant Treasures. And of course this business of stretching out their tongues, snapping their fingers, showing the entire universe through this light that the Buddhas have emitted is a way of communicating this divine power, supernatural power. It's a way probably of saying that this teaching is beyond conceptual understanding. As I indicated in a previous video, we're now in a world of the Lotus Sutra that goes beyond the typical way of viewing life and persons and birth and death. We're in the world of whatever you want to call it, supernatural, divine, cosmic. I like the word cosmic. It's a way of using our imaginations to portray a scope of reality that goes well beyond our ordinary way of thinking and viewing the world and the universe. In chapter 22, which is a very short chapter, called in the Gene Reeves translation Entrustment, which is also what it's called in the Hurvitz translation, Hurvitz says, "The Buddha leaves the Lotus Sutra in the care of his listeners, all of whom then go their separate ways." So he has now entrusted the further propagation of the teaching, the reading, the reciting, the copying, the preaching about the Lotus message to the various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the vast assembly, the vast retinue of those who have come from all parts of the universe. And they go on back to their home turf, so to speak. I think Sakyamuni is still in the stupa with Abundant Treasures at this point, but he has bid farewell to the vast number of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that have gathered to hear him preach the Lotus on this particular occasion. And then the following chapter, chapter 23, Reeves calls The Previous Lives of Medicine King Bodhisattva. Hurvitz calls this The Former Affairs of the Bodhisattva Medicine King, and describes it thusly. The Buddha narrates an incident from a former incarnation of the Bodhisattva Mahasayaraja. I think the authors of the Lotus Sutra are probably doing a couple of things in this chapter at least. One is by the fact that this Bodhisattva Medicine King sacrifices his own body and parts of his body is to again emphasize the value of the Lotus Sutra, and also begins to describe this capability that certain cosmic bodhisattvas have of transforming themselves. In this case, for example, in the part that I recited, where he basically cuts off his arm and then is able to cause his arm to be replaced. It's what's called in the chapter a concentration in which one can take on any form. And we'll be seeing much more of that in the next couple of chapters. But the other interesting thing I think about this chapter on the Bodhisattva Medicine King is toward the end, he's speaking from the perspective of a woman who hears the Lotus Sutra and, quote, acts according to its teaching, and what happens to her in terms of, frankly, being reborn in Amita's Pure Land, which, as you well know now, if you've seen any of my videos, is the lineage that I most identify with.